I work at a retail store and I detest my job with all my heart. Because I was a dumb shit and said I was always available though, they'd routinely fuck me over and put me on nights. I whine and bitch and moan and digress. I'm okay working nights since I get to see my boyfriend when he picks me up at least. Boyfriend usually gets off at 10:30, but he doesn't leave until 11. Most nights I'd have to wait for him to arrive. On top of that, he had to make a 10-minute drive as well, so I'd have to wait around an hour and 40 to 45 minutes. That didn't really bother me that much though. He'd call to tell me he was coming and make sure I was still alive at least. Earlier in the week, an Uber driver had kept on asking me if I was someone named Lenore. I told him no, and he did it again, but this time kept asking if I was sure. How the fuck am I not gonna be sure of my name? Fortunately, at that moment, my boyfriend pulled in and honked at me, causing this Uber creep to speed away. I'm a paranoid penny, so this made me wonder if he'd been watching me or something, and knew my boyfriend always came late. Then I tweaked out, since I'd kept on getting these weird phone calls from a telemarketing agency or something. Whenever I'd answer though, no one was there, and they'd hang up immediately. Was this connected? Was the government watching me? Did I only have 7 days left to live? Well, fast forward 3 days later, and I'm just standing there listening to some music, waiting for him to pick me up and call me. He finally did and started cracking a joke about how he was glad the creepy Uber driver didn't answer. As we started chatting the shit with each other and joking around, suddenly this Indian woman walked up to me. I didn't hear what she was saying at first, since I had noise-canceling headphones. I could tell she was getting closer and closer though, and kept on calling out to me. Finally, her hey reached my ears. I looked over to her, smiled, and went back to talking to my boyfriend. She did it again though, so I excused myself. Yes, may I help you? Do you need a ride? She asked. She looked nice enough, but something was off about her. Her car was parked at the stop sign, and I could see there was someone else in it. No, my friend is coming to pick me up right now actually. Thank you. I noticed there was a man in the driver's seat, and she wasn't wearing a uniform from either of the stores near us. She started to ask me again. Are you sure? I can give you a ride. Do you need a ride? Get in, come on, you need a ride, right? I was beginning to feel a little uncomfortable. My preschool don't get in a stranger's car training kicked in, so I politely declined again and went back to talking to my boyfriend. Hey, are you close? I just pulled out, I'll get there, just stay on the line. That woman's gone now, right? No, she was not gone. In fact, she was standing 6 feet away glaring at me. She looked very annoyed. I told him in code that no, she had not left. She had in fact remained there leaning on the car watching me. She was looking angrier with each passing second as well. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see the man tell her something. She looked at me and began to interrogate me. Your friend's not here. You need a ride? Where's your friend? He probably forgot about you. That's okay, we'll take you where you need to go. It's cold, come on, tell us where you live, we'll drop you off. At this point, she got closer to me. I tried to avoid her by moving to the farther end of the plaza strip. Honey? Yeah, so about my sister? She's gotten closer, but I'm pretty scared she's too far away from home. Something might happen. Hurry so I can tell you. I said a code as the car drove up next to me. Now she looked extremely pissed. Get in the car now. At this point, she opened the car and began trying to push me inside, pulling me, yanking on my jacket. She was a taller and bigger woman than me, so she even tried to pick me up. At this point, I'm pretty sure my bowels threatened to release. I was screaming and kicking and wiggling. Meanwhile, I could hear through the phone him yelling that he was on his way and he was calling the police. Now my mind was running 1,000 miles an hour. I was panicking, thinking I was going to be raped or presented as some weird present for her husband. He looked very content with her efforts to kidnap me. Get in! Shut up! I will hit you! I started crying as she managed to push my torso into the car. My right hand was locked to my phone. She began trying to pull it out of my hand. My boyfriend was panicking, telling me the police were sending an officer right now. She shoved my face into the leather seat. My airway was obstructed, and she was not letting me go. She was bigger than me, stronger than me, and she knew it. Her whole weight was pressing onto me. I tried not to panic so I didn't black out from lack of oxygen. All of a sudden, I started getting mad as shit. Her husband said something in Punjabi. She lifted one hand up and leaned down, trying to get something out of the front. Immediately, I used the arms I'd been using to push myself off the seat to jab her in the stomach. She recoiled, letting go of me a little. I headbutted her, tossing my melon back as I screamed, fear-stricken and adrenaline-hazed. Finally, my boyfriend pulled in. I bolted to his car as the Indian woman was sitting stunned on the ground. After I shut the door, he sped off towards his house. When we got inside, I broke down, babbling about how scared and terrifying it all was, and how if I hadn't had that opportunity, she might have taken me to her house and done God knows what. After this incident, the police officer they dispatched got there 20 minutes later, and of course didn't find anyone. My boyfriend talked to his boss and was granted the ability to leave early to come get me. I'm still weirded out by cars stalling in the plaza. This happened about 3 weeks ago. I'm generally a slightly paranoid person as it stands already, and I've listened to many of these types of stories. I'm a small woman in her early 20s who lives alone in a smallish condo/apartment with her cat. It's on the second floor of the building where I moved in a few months ago. There are 2 doors one must enter to get inside my apartment. First is outside leading into the building, and second is obviously my apartment door itself. Tenants have keys for the first outside door, which only has one lock, whereas the actual apartment doors have both locks and deadbolts. Otherwise, a visitor has to be buzzed in to be allowed inside. For some clarity, there are 8 apartments per building in my complex, with an outside door on either side of the building. Mine is closer to the back, and is situated directly above a currently empty space. My downstairs neighbor to the left is around my age, and the only neighbor I'm actually close with. She's often away though, staying with her boyfriend. This means that while I technically live near others, my home is very isolated. There is an outdoor light situated next to the door, but I'd noticed when returning home that the bulb had either broken or burned out, and hadn't thought to contact maintenance to fix it. It was already pretty late at night and I was tired anyway. There hadn't appeared to be many others home in my building, as the parking lot on my side wasn't particularly full. I was taking care of a few chores around the house at around 10 p.m. It was Friday night, so I was running the dishwasher and folding up laundry. I'd had a pretty long week at school, and arrived home probably an hour to an hour and a half before. My cat was kind of keeping me company as I puttered along. It was hard to hear much outside when the dishwasher was going, and I was already distracted. But I did notice a sort of soft rustling sound coming from outside. It didn't sound too strange aside from being fairly repetitive. I didn't really know what it was at this point, but being constantly anxious, I was too frightened of the dark to look outside the window to that side of the building. This might very well have been totally unrelated, but I still think it bears mentioning. Fast forward a bit. I was standing at my kitchen counter working on a report on my laptop. Over the sound of the dishwasher though, I heard a soft knock on my door. I was unsure at first if I'd even actually heard anything. I went still and waited for a moment. There it was again, quiet but a little longer and faster. This made me pretty uneasy. It was late at night. My first thought was that it might be one of my neighbors. I approached the door silently and looked out the peephole. As I mentioned, the only neighbor I know well is the young woman who lives downstairs, but I am familiar with what all the others look like. The man standing outside was completely unfamiliar to me. Tall, wearing either a dark blue or black jacket, Caucasian, and with very dark hair. I had no idea who this guy was. What was very unusual was just how close he was standing to the door. Even distorted through the peephole, He was so close I would guess him to be standing right up against it, leaning his face in and staring through the peephole. There was an odd sort of energy in his stance, if that makes any sense. I felt extremely unnerved. I was glad I'd made very little noise when walking over. I backed up about 3 feet from the door and waited. I'm not totally sure how much time passed, but he stood there a couple of minutes, even longer than that, before I heard him go downstairs and through the outside door. Now, I've had a neighbor from downstairs knock on my door in the evening before to ask if I was experiencing a power outage like him. He'd brought his wife with him, probably to reassure me, and had stood a reasonable distance from the door after knocking firmly. That's exactly what this strange guy didn't do. I know I'm paranoid though, so I try to convince myself I was making a big deal of nothing. I told myself this was probably just a similar situation. I was far too immediately uncomfortable though to consider answering the door. I decided to listen to my gut instead. I texted both my mom and my male friend about the situation. My friend offered to come keep me company, but by that time I had talked myself out of my nervousness and assured him I was fine. I went to sleep about an hour later and woke up having almost completely forgotten about it. Shit got weird the next day though. Only in the context of what I saw next morning did that knock begin to seem frightening. I had agreed to accompany my mom and her boyfriend to a yard sale that morning in some nearby neighborhoods. They were picking me up early, around 7:30. My mom gave me a call from her car when they arrived on my side of the building to let me know to come down. I grabbed my bag, went out my door and downstairs, but as soon as I opened the outside door, something was very clearly wrong. The handle turned very loosely in my hand, and the door popped open very easily. Upon shutting it again behind me, the handle itself completely fell out of the hole. Looking back, I wish I'd taken a picture of it because it's a little bit hard to describe. It had obviously been tampered with. The outside portion of the door handle held in place with screws was now completely missing. The lock component of the handle was missing too. Essentially, all that was left behind was a stripped handle with a hole in the middle where the keyhole should be. My mom, having heard about the knocking incident from me the night before, was not cool with this all and insisted I report this. I contacted maintenance and the police, but there are no cameras situated near my apartment, and definitely not near my door. I've gotten no additional information as of now. In talking with my neighbors, who were obviously made aware of the vandalism as well, nobody who was at home or awake around that time heard anyone knock on their door, or came in contact with, or saw the man I described. Maybe I'm overthinking a bit, but this does make me nervous. It makes the approach seem much more targeted and less random, as if the person knew I'd be there alone. For what it's worth, at least the outside door handle was replaced very quickly that afternoon, and nothing like that has happened ever since. This is definitely a childhood memory of mine that I will never forget. I'm female and 22, by the way. Growing up, my aunt and uncle owned a beach condo. My favorite way to spend the summer was to stay there with my family, specifically my cousin Charlie. We were absolutely inseparable growing up. There was a 1-year difference between us. The beach we stayed at was a very popular tourist beach on the SC coast. So, in the summer, it was incredibly busy. I mean, barely any room between you and the family next to you. Now, my family would spend all day on that beach, from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. The beach would stay crowded until about 5, when everyone would go back to their rooms to shower and go out to eat. This meant from around 5 to 7 every day. That was my favorite time to be outside. We would have all the room to run wild, build sandcastles, dig huge holes. We wouldn't have to worry about people knocking them down or being too close. Around 5:30 p.m. one day, my family decided they wanted to walk to the pier about 2 miles away. Charlie and I, though, begged to stay behind so we could build sandcastles together. We were 9 and 10 at the time, so they said we could stay as long as we didn't get in the water or leave our spot. The condo we stayed at was one row back, and we were not allowed to cross the street without adults. We agreed to their terms and continued to build a row of sandcastles as they walked off into the distance. Around 5 minutes later, though, this extremely tall man wearing this floppy beach hat, sunglasses, and with a dollop of sunscreen on his nose came running straight up to us. He started by commenting how beautiful our sandcastles were, asking how long it took us to build them that high. He also asked if it was just the two of us working on them. We were both extremely introverted kids. We thanked him and kept our answers short and tried to ignore him as he stood there watching us. All of a sudden, he got real quiet and started to glance around at the mostly empty beach. Then he said he had to go meet a friend of his. He told us to stay right there so he could bring his friend back to look at how great our sandcastles were. Then he jogged away from us. When he'd gotten a safe distance, Charlie and I both looked at each other and said, "We've gotta get out of here." Side note, hell yeah at us for being smart kids. We immediately started weighing our options. We knew our family wouldn't be back for at least another 30 minutes. We also knew we weren't allowed to cross the street, and quite frankly, we were scared to. About 100 yards away, though, was a tiny ramp overlooking the ocean. I believe it was a handicap access to the beach, as well as just a place to sit down, I guess. We grabbed our big shovels and decided to hollow out underneath that thing enough to where we could crawl under and not be seen. It didn't take us very long, since the high tide over the years had taken out a good 3 feet of sand underneath. Our adrenaline was rushing mad fast, too. We took our shovels inside with us and crawled underneath. The man was still yet to be seen. I assume it took us all of 8 minutes to climb under the pier and bury it again. Our heads were partially visible above the sand horizon, and we started freaking out, thinking he would surely be able to spot us if he just looked hard enough. There were 2 boogie boards lying about 50 feet away, though. It looked like some kids had abandoned them there. We grabbed them and propped them up against the ramp, covering our crawl space and the top of our heads from sight. Charlie curled up in a ball and cried, while running scenarios by me that we were definitely going to get taken. I tried my best to calm him down and say everything was going to be okay. Our parents would be back soon enough. I definitely felt like crying myself, though. The whole thing was so weird. I knew that since we both had such a bad feeling about the situation, especially at such a young age, this man was definitely having sinister intentions. Charles and I tried to peek out of the tiny slits where the boogie boards curved, and eventually saw the man walking back. He didn't have anyone with him, which we definitely thought he would since he said he was going to bring friends. As we observed, we noticed the man had seen we were gone. He turned around several times, checking to see if we were in the ocean or by the dunes. Once he realized and didn't seem to notice us that we were gone, he got extremely angry. He started huffing, puffing, stomping around. He looked over to our sandcastles and kicked them all down. We'd built a ton over the course of the day and basically had a gigantic wall of them. He made sure to kick every single one down before storming away. We stayed under that ramp thing for 45 more minutes until our family got back. We were way too scared to come out, especially after seeing the man's irrational reaction. We cried and told our family what had happened, and of course, they didn't believe us. We still talk about it sometimes at family gatherings or holidays. Both of us still remember it like it was yesterday. So I can't entirely say I know what's happening here, as to this day I still have no clue who did and is doing this to me. This all started when I was in 8th grade, the very first time it happened. This was a good 6 or 7 years ago, mind you. I live in a sweet southern suburb outside Austin, Texas with my family. Being as I'm the oldest of the 4 of us, I was always home alone because my siblings had parks and rec, sports, things like that, and I didn't really do any extracurriculars. It was a weeknight and my family were all at my sister's gymnastics tournament. I had been supposed to go as well, as all of the members of the family had to attend all our siblings' stuff, but I was sick. I've always been a fairly cautious creature, one who makes sure the doors are locked when I'm alone. Because of my lifelong love of anything and everything scary, naturally I had watched more than a few episodes of Criminal Minds and the like before heading to the 3rd floor, where my parents' room is, to take a bath in their fancy tub. It was about 8:30. It was in the winter as well, so it had long since gotten dark outside. About 20 minutes into my bath, though, I started to hear footsteps, loud ones like big work boots, walking up the steps. My dad, being a construction worker, did wear some big boots, so I thought it might have been him. I called out though and heard nothing in response. The steps kept on going though, before reaching the top. Then all the sounds stopped and I didn't hear anything else. I turned the water off and listened for a while, but there was still nothing. I turned the water back on and went back to reading my book in the tub. The next night, one of my sisters had their final game. This game was a very late one in a town about 25 miles away, so again my family went together after making me dinner. I almost decided to go since I was feeling a little bit better, but I didn't because my mom didn't want to risk getting people outside the family sick. I really wish I had gone with them though. Like usual, I locked up the side door and ate some ice cream while watching a bunch of scary shows. I then headed up to my parents' room to take another fancy bath and read more of my book. This time it was a bit later though, almost around 10 or so. I was taking a very long bath and had already forgotten about the night before, until that sound happened again. I heard those same footsteps creeping up the stairs. Mind you, our stairs are hardwood, not carpet, so you could hear when someone was stepping on them quite clearly. The house was dead silent too, except the sound of the TV, which I had left turned on in the room outside the bathroom. I automatically turned the water off again and felt my heart almost stop beating. I was so scared. The footsteps this time seemed quite hurried, like the person was skipping up the steps in a rush. Once again, they stopped when they reached the top. I waited for almost 5 minutes, and nothing. I turned the water back on and picked up my old track phone and dialed my mom's number. She picked up and I started talking right away, asking if it was her. She didn't reply, but I could hear someone on the other end breathing. I started to get a bit mad. Why was she messing with me like this and not replying? All of a sudden though, a deep voice called back through the phone, which made me almost drop it in the tub. It snapped at me. "I am not your mom." Then they hung up. As if instantly, banging started on the bathroom door. I burst into tears. This was not just knocking. They were smashing that door like it was going to fall down. This entire person's weight was being thrown into it. I dialed 911. Right when I hit send, the banging stopped and I hung up. I really didn't know if my family was just playing a trick on me. The last thing I wanted to do was have the cops come. I was already a troubled kid, so I might get in even more trouble. I stayed there in the bathroom, sitting in the corner wrapped in a towel for over 30 minutes before I heard my family's minivan pull up into the driveway. At that moment, I started crying even more. I knew that whoever was just in my house was not a member of my family. My mom called out my name, and I responded by telling them I was upstairs. I was not leaving this room until I knew I was safe. I told her what had happened, and she didn't believe me at first. The door was still locked when they got home, so how could someone have just gotten in? It turned out she had left her phone at home on the counter by accident, so when I told her to get it, she went to right where she'd left it. There it was, sitting right on the counter. No incoming call in the phone's memory either. I showed her my phone though, which clearly still had the outgoing call on it. This didn't add up. For a while, she thought I must have had some sort of mental break that night or hallucinated everything. To ease my mind though, we added a chain lock to every door in the house. For 5 years, nothing extreme like that ever happened again. Life did get pretty busy though. I got involved in activities that made sure I was never home alone again. I joined sports in every season, volunteered, anything and everything I could do. Every month or so, though, I would hear these distinct footsteps on the porch below me. I lived on the second floor in the bedroom on the far left side directly over the front porch, so I could hear everything, even my dog sighing. It would always be someone like pacing back and forth. Then my dog would start barking and immediately the steps would stop. It got so bad one night when I was 15, I woke up myself and the twins. We all met in the hall, fully prepared to go down and attack whoever was on our porch. My brother equipped with his baseball bat. Once we got downstairs though, it stopped. It wasn't until this last summer, just as I'd turned 18 and finished my first year of college, that the scariest moment happened to me. It was a weekend night, and my parents had gotten accustomed to going out of town pretty much twice a month, leaving me, my brother, and my sister home alone. They took my other brother, who was only 9. This night, the twins were going to a party in the neighboring town, though, and would not be coming home until the next day. I saw this as the perfect time to camp out downstairs in the living room, make a bunch of food, watch a bunch of movies, and get high. I FaceTimed my boyfriend. Somewhere into the call, though, he said something that kinda creeped me out. I really didn't think much of it at first since I was so high, but he called out to me and asked, "You're home alone, right?" I was confused and laughed. Of course I was. Why? He shook it off, saying he thought he'd seen something in the porchway behind me, but he wasn't really sure what it was. I got up right away and walked to the laundry room. I made sure the door was closed, I double-checked all the locks, I passed down at around 1 a.m., TV on and all. All of a sudden though, I woke up to a loud banging around 3. Immediately, I was pierced with fear. It was the same loud body-slamming banging from years ago, a memory I had blocked. It started at the side door directly to my right. I couldn't move my body. I was too scared. I looked over and saw a light flashing inside, like someone was shaking a flashlight into the door. Then the same noise started at the front door, and again at the side door. All 3 doors to my house were lit up, banging so hard the entire house was shaking. Then I heard it on the front porch, like a knife or something sharp being dragged along the door. I was bawling my eyes out. I dialed 911 and started frantically explaining what was going on between my sobs. The person on the phone told me to scream out I was calling the cops, and if needed, he would send someone over. I did, and right away the house went still. Then I could hear someone laughing from all the doors, multiple different voices. This automatically made me think someone must be playing a prank on me. My friends and siblings had been known to try and scare each other. I told the man that everything seemed fine. I thought my siblings might just be playing a prank on me. I laid there and called my brother. When he answered though, I could tell right away it was not him. I could hear the party in the background, which horrified me. I told him what had happened. The twins caught an Uber and immediately came back. We spent the rest of the night texting our friends, trying to figure out who it could have been, but nothing. Almost all our friends were accounted for at that party, nearly 20 miles away, so it couldn't have been any of them. We all slept on the couch with no more occurrences that night. It's been about 5 months since then, and I've since gone back to school. I've only come home once between then and now, and currently I'm home on winter break. Nothing else odd has happened, as I've tried not to stay home alone. Last night though, I was awake for no reason other than scrolling around on Reddit when around 2 a.m. I heard someone pacing back and forth on the porch. I texted my brother, and he confirmed that he heard it too. This happened to me in 2008 in Las Vegas. I was living with my husband and our son, who was about 2 years old at the time. I would frequently take our son to the grocery store early in the evening with me to do some shopping and give my husband some alone time. I never really worried much. The store was literally just outside my neighborhood, plus we lived in a very nice area. I finished up my shopping and put my son in his car seat. By the time I'd finished loading the car, he was passed out. I decided to quickly fill my tank at the gas station on the other side of the lot. While I was pumping gas though, a big truck pulled up on the opposite side of my pump. The man pumped his gas and seemed to take no notice of me. Then he left. Just as I was finishing up though, his truck suddenly pulled up next to my car once again. The man inside, who looked like he loved his meth, said, "Excuse me, miss, but I just felt compelled to tell you how beautiful you are. As a matter of fact, the only reason I came to get gas here, it's because I saw you come here from the grocery store, and I just had to be nearer to you. I've been trying to find the courage to approach you for a while, actually." I was flattered and thanked him for the compliment, but quickly informed him I was off the market. "I know, it was worth a shot though." He began to pull off. Suddenly he backed up again though, and said, "If you tell your husband what I said, I'll kill him." Then he drove off. Needless to say, this freaked me out, so immediately I called my husband. He told me not to come directly home, in case the guy followed me. I drove around a bit until I felt I'd lost him, and then I went home. My husband and I went over it over and over again. How could the man possibly kill my husband if he didn't know him or even where we lived? Then, some of the things he said started to ring in my head. How he'd been watching me at the grocery store. I started to think that maybe he hadn't just meant that night. How long? How many days had he been watching me there? When I told him I was married, he said he knew. Is it possible he had followed me home on previous occasions even? We put extra locks on the doors and took extra precautions. We tried to forget about it. He was probably just some crazy guy, right? Well, about a week later, around 8 or 9 p.m., my husband decided to run up to the gas station to get some cigarettes. I was sitting on the computer in our dining room as he left through the garage door. Our son was sleeping in his bedroom on the other side of the house. About a minute after he had left though, suddenly I heard the garage door into the laundry room open and somebody coming inside. Immediately, I assumed my husband must be grabbing something he'd forgotten. I called out to him and didn't get a response, so I called his name again. I received no answer, but I could hear someone moving around in the laundry room. I started to get worried. All the guns in the house were in our room. I would have to walk right past the laundry room to get to them. Suddenly, I heard my 2 pit bulls in my room start growling. Both dogs started barking viciously and ran toward the laundry room door, at which point I heard the laundry room door to the garage open and slam shut very quickly. At that point, I grabbed my phone. I ran into my son's room and called my husband to ask if he had just returned home for something. To my horror, he was still at the gas station. I told him someone was in the house, but I thought the dogs had scared them out. He instructed me to stay in our son's bedroom with the door closed. He was on his way home. So I sat there in the dark next to my sleeping son in sheer terror. 2 minutes later, I heard the dogs barking again and someone barging into the house through the garage door. After what felt like forever, my husband came into our son's bedroom. He checked the whole house and all around our property, but couldn't find anybody. We came to the conclusion that the stalker from the gas station must have finally taken his opportunity to catch me alone. Based on what that creepy tweaker had said to me, who else could it have been? What really freaked me out though is not knowing how long he had been watching me before that. How long had he been watching me before he approached me at the gas station and before he barged into our home? It really opened my eyes that someone could stalk you without you ever knowing about it until it's too late to do anything. I firmly believe my 2 pit bulls saved my life, my son's life, and possibly my husband's too that night. That had my husband not let the dogs into the house before he left, I wouldn't be here right now, nor would my son. To this day, anytime I have to be home alone, or my new husband and I are sleeping, I have to have my pit bull beside me to watch over me.